these times during COVID, when we're all sitting at home, it's sort of like a ray of light that we get to watch these amazing sessions when we can't all be together. It certainly brightens up my evenings.
आज पेंडेमिक में हम डिजिटली जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल कर रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि हमारे सामने श्रोता नहीं है, हम आपस में बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस फील को, उस उमंग को महसूस कर सकते हैं कि हजारों लाखों लोग हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, हमको सुन रहे हैं और कहीं ना कहीं कोई एक सार्थक हस्तक्षेप हो रहा है.
People who came online to view and listen to our incredible speakers from across the world, we were able to continue in our tradition of ensuring the free flow of knowledge and information.
On behalf of Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, I welcome you to JLF First Edition. We're delighted to host the launch of Ravi Shankar Etteth's latest book, Return of the Brahmin, published by Westland. Best-selling author and political cartoonist Ravi Shankar Etteth's latest Return of the Brahmin, a sequel to his earlier novel, The Brahmin, is a historical thriller following the escapades of King Ashoka's most trusted ally and spymaster. In the midst of a violent conspiracy, Ashoka calls upon the Brahmin to protect the kingdom against a lethal foe and attempts to topple the empire. Ravi Shankar's novels include Tiger by the River and Killing Time in Delhi. A journalist and political cartoonist with several decades of experience, he's currently with the New Indian Express in Delhi. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us here today. Congratulations on your latest novel. We would love to hear you share some of your insights and experiences on writing this book. Over to you, Ravi.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm glad. I hope you like the book. I wrote this book primarily for a reason that this is the age when people are writing a lot about mythology, Indian mythology. I mean, Indian mythology has become a fiction industry. I mean, it's pretty good stuff, mind you. I mean, you have Anand who's writing great stuff, you have Amish, all of them. But what I found interesting was that there's very little on Indian history. You know, so I decided that why don't I take a period which is very little known in Indian history, which is the Magadha period, the period of Ashoka reign. And I thought it'd be great to kind of have a spy story, which is set in that period, because it's a very dramatic period. I mean, you have Kalinga war kind of looming, and I have a great fascination for Ravan. I really love Ravan. So I decided that he's a great scholar, a great warrior, a great kind of one of the most tragic but powerful figures of history. So I decided why not I kind of bring them all together. So I mixed mythology and history, but I tried to also look at the historical aspect of Sri Lanka, Buddhism, Raman at the time. It was like a really, really exotic cocktail. So that is why, and number one, and number two, I really love thrillers. I write big crime fiction. So that is the reason, in a nutshell, why I decided to write.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for sharing your experience and many congratulations on the book. JLF First Edition is delighted to launch Return of the Brahmin. In conversation today with senior advocate C. Aryama Sundaram, Ravi Shankar Etteth discusses the nuances of historical thrillers and gives us a glimpse into this intricate vortex of death and deceit. C. Aryama Sundaram earned his law degree from Madras Law College after graduating from the Madras University as a gold medalist in philosophy. He currently practices in the Supreme Court of India. All our sessions that have been broadcast till now have been archived and are available to view in the Mughal Tent venue on our website and on our YouTube and Facebook channels. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present Return of the Brahmin. Ravi Shankar Etteth in conversation with C. Aryama Sundaram. Over to you, Mr. Sundaram.
Thank you.
Hi, Aryama.
Well, Ravi, we've had many conversations before,
Well,
but I think this is the first time we've had a official conversation about any books you've written. I've had my views about many of them, and you and I have shared them.
True.
But I think today what I'd really like you to share is with everyone various aspects of the book, which I believe in some way, to me, indicate Ravi Shankar the person.
Okay.
And which possibly brings out Ravi Shankar the person and why he writes such a book. Well, obviously, the first question I'm going to ask you is, we find many mythological fantasies these days, but we don't find too many historical fantasies. And the fact of the matter is that you have managed to intermingle mythology with history. So, what is it you do? Is it that you have studied a historical character you find interesting? Is it that you thereafter find a link with that character with something in mythology which you feel you can bridge? How do you manage to bring the two together? Because there are various aspects of your book which are obviously lifted from mythology.
Right.
Whereas the basis of your book is that it's a historical thriller, a historical, whether it's fantasy or reality, you will tell us.
Okay. Now, the answer to the first question, there's a paucity of historical fiction in India, while abroad you have so much. I mean, you really have so much. Sorry. And a lot of devices are there. So you have, like, for example, what is it? Oscar Wilde is a detective. Oscar Wilde is a detective, right? Now, that is historical fiction. That's imaginary. That's the innovative way of doing it. And you have Catfield, or like, for example, Times of the Crusades. You have Elizabethan times when, espionage really thrived. But unfortunately, in Indian history, the only time espionage is mentioned as a very strong, always in action is during Chanakya's, after Shastra came. And that was in the period of the Magadha Empire. And even though Chanakya was Chandragupta's guru and friend and mentor, the real use of Arthashastra was made by Ashoka, because the only way you could have expanded such an amazing empire, created such a huge empire, would have been impossible to do without espionage, without spycraft.
In fact, Ravi, your choice of the Magadha Empire and the various reasons you've given for that, and especially you're referring to Ashoka and his widening empire, makes me ask you this question. We historically hear of Ashoka as this cruel king who thereafter had a change of heart, became a Buddhist after the Kalinga massacre, and then worked very hard to elevate the misery of people, lift people out of their normal doom. And in many ways, that was the period which one sees as the great period of Ashoka. And in fact, even today in India, we have the Ashoka Chakra. We have the Ashoka Awards. I mean, we deify Ashoka almost. But I find in your book, and to be quite frank about it, Ashoka comes out as a very cruel guy, a very successful king perhaps, but a king who has all the wiles that the Chanakya would have taught him, or a Machiavelli would have taught the prince, and above all, appears to be very cruel and capable of cruelty. And all this book, Return of the Brahmin, is post-Kalinga War. As you know, the Brahmin Wars ends with the Kalinga War.
Yes.
This is post-Kalinga War, and I find Ashoka quite a cruel man.
See, again, we get into two parts of it. History is not always written by the king. History is also written by people who have wandered into history. Very little is known about Ashoka. And Ashoka actually was discovered by a British explorer, by the East India Company. Right? He discovered it after Ashoka, the war was over. And every king, every government, every leader does his PR, and because he wants a space in history, he wants a place in history. And remember, when Ashoka was ruling, then it was the time when Buddhism was to the rise, and he had encouraged. And because Buddhism was a very powerful way for the first time for a king to get a religious weapon to balance the Brahmins and the Hindus in court, who held, tremendous power. They held power, they demanded anything of the king, the word was law. So Ashoka was a very politically keen guy, but very little is known of Ashoka. In fact, there is no historical record of the war of Kalinga except what you can read in the Pali, in the inscriptions or whatever, I think. But now, what I am saying is that Ashoka was one of the cruelest monarchs in history.
I see.
Yeah.
Even after Kalinga War.
Even before Kalinga War.
Even before, yes. So after.
Absolutely. No, this is not just, Kalinga was not the only case of this violence. Ashoka was the unwanted son of Bimbisara or Bindusara, who is supposed to have fathered him from a Baba, a Brahmin woman who was Baba. I don't know even how it sounds. I can't think of a Brahmin woman Baba, but anyway, that is what the legend goes. And he had some skin disease in which his father hated. So there was a really complex guy, and his father didn't want him to be king, right? So what does he do? He kills the crown prince, his brother. And not only that, he murders 99 of his stepbrothers, which is not the act of a kind man, which is the act of any medieval cruel prince who is interested. It's all across the world, whether it be Europe, whether it be Asia. Fratricide and patricide is very, very, even regicide is a very common thing. Hang on, let me finish. Number two, here is a guy who hears one of his concubines comment on how unpleasant his body odor is and how unpleasant it is to touch his skin, which is infected. That he sends the entire harem to torture in this place called Palace of Hell. So look at the guy's sadism. He creates the most beautiful prison in Pataliputra, and it is of exquisite beauty as a building. But inside, it is run by this guy called Chandragirika, who was Ashoka's chief torturer, who invented the most horrific tortures, right? You have a king who must kill his brothers. Here's a king who sends his concubines, all of them to kind of a hell. Here's a king who's sadistically created the torture chamber, the worst torture chamber in the kingdom, inside one of the most beautiful, right? Now I come to this. Now history says that Ashoka suddenly had a change of heart when he came to the Kalinga battlefield and one and saw soldiers and people lying dead. I don't believe it. How come a king who is so exposed to slaughter, who has incredible ambition, as it is proved later, because he's created one of the greatest empires on earth? Because if he had no ambition, he would that. But I said, okay, I'm going to be Buddhist. I'll go and live in a cave and kind of meditate on the Buddha and give the kingdom. He did. So a king who has had such a cruel past and who has such sadistic inclination, there is no way he would have become a Buddhist and say, I'm walking the path of peace and I'm going to be a nice guy. It is impossible. He was as successful a psychopath as any great king.
In fact, Ravi, since you say this, I must tell you something which struck me.
Okay.
You probably are one of the only people I've ever heard who's been so, I won't say harsh, but so tough about the kind of person Ashoka was. Mm-hmm. But strangely in the book, while you describe the cruelty of Ashoka, you do not judge him for his cruelty. No. In fact, it's almost like you take his cruelty as a very natural corollary to his being a successful king. Does that show you as a person who believes that anyone who's doing a certain trade, who's in a given profession, should follow everything that profession demands, and as being a professional success is all that it counts for? And not that a person should look more at the more loftier ideals of being good and kind. And if he wanted those loftier ideals, he should take to religion and take to the church or take to the temple.
Look, let's take the case of the pandemic. I'm sorry to digress. I think sometime in the 1800s, there was a very famous British economist who formulated the thing of the law of the commons. Right? Law of commons basically says that freedom can be used by an individual or interpreted by an individual as something which he can manipulate for his rights given a situation where he can exercise it to his advantage, right? Now, what is the greatest prerogative of the king? It is freedom. He can do what the hell he wants. Right? Now, Ashoka, I have said, written earlier too, war is the destiny of cruelty is the ultimate weapon because unless you cannot love a man, you can't love a king and he can't stay a king unless he is feared. Just being loved is not enough. You can be deposed by a lot of nice kings in the last, Mughal emperor. Sorry, I'm digressing in terms of time. I mean, who were kind of killed by people or insulted by people because he was weak. He was a nice guy. Rulers are not meant to be nice guys, but rulers are also meant to be wise guys. Ashoka, as a human being, is aware of his instincts are right because his political instincts are right because he wants to fashion a legacy of kindness, mercy, and greatness. So he knows the principle of that. At the same time, he has to yield to his base nature, his cruel and savage nature, and also his loyalty to the So, man is a combination of many things, obviously. I'm not saying anything new, but a man is a combination of many strengths and many weaknesses. But I think some strengths and weaknesses come together very well to create a man who is able to influence history.
Well, all right. You have your view of Ashoka, which comes out very clearly in the book. And I must say, that says all the more the way that you can depict the person, and yet at the end of it, nobody turns around and says, oh my God, Ashoka is really a villain. One looks at it as, oh, Ashoka is a clever king, a good king. And now that's why I wanted to ask you this question. But now let me just digress a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I found that various parts of your book are highly descriptive.
Okay.
It's almost like if I can just read one part of your book,
right,
where you describe a fight.
Okay.
Now, the way you describe that fight, you spent almost a page and more, I don't know how many words. He stepped forward, brought it up to an angle. He had a great broadsword. He stepped forward, brought it up at an angle, allowing the lead soldier's blade to slide all the way to the hilt. Steel met steel and sparks flew. Before the attacker had time to recover his balance, the stranger smashed his sword's pommel down on the man's head, pulverizing his skull. Even before the bandit's body hit the ground, the stranger, his arm extended and elbow locked, swerved aside to allow two of the dead man's partners to stumble through the suddenly empty space, and plowed his blade sideways through their bellies, slashing away bunches of entrails and shredded muscle. From the corner of his eye, he glimpsed a bandit's sword flashing down on his neck. In a series of fluid moments, he arched back, threw up his arm, and took the blow on the thick leather guard of his forearm. He swung up and smashed his sword's hilt against the bandit's jaw, propelling pieces of teeth into his brain, killing him instantly. And then it goes on. I mean, apart from the fact that the only person I know who can do all this is Salman Khan, apart from that fact, what really strikes me is your detail in the description, that it's almost like you want the reader to feel that he's there, watching it and almost be an onlooker of all this.
True.
So rather than trying to tell the reader what has happened, you actually are trying to transport the reader into that space, right, so he can see and visualize what is happening and be a part of it.
Yeah.
Is this a descriptive style you've cultivated, or is it a descriptive style you feel is the best, or is it a style which comes naturally to you?
It's instinctive. I mean, you must remember that I'm an artist. I'm a political cartoonist. I'm a graphic artist. So I am instinctively drawn to the visual narrative. I mean, I like to, through my cartoons or my drawings or my designs, I try to visually represent things as clearly as possible. So you need to stylize some tricks. You need to kind of create the interruptive kind of impact. It's, for example, I mean, just imagine a guy's teeth going into somebody's brain and kind of killing him. And that's a normal way of doing it. So it shocks you back, right? So you have to be descriptive, not just saying, he went there, he hit him in the face. No, you have to visualize the scenario like a film guy, which is what a graphic artist does. And then he says, okay, let's kind of try to find out what are the most effective images. There are images. You're throwing images to the reader. which is why I like this. I don't know if it works, but I mean, that's what I like.
You know, in fact, I found your descriptiveness even more interesting because every time you're describing anyone eating anything, you've gone into exactly what they're eating, where it's from. You almost want your reader to taste it. I'll just read you a portion of your book for all the onlookers. The Brahmin noticed with amusement the multitude of palace attendants streaming in with silver trays of steaming white, long-grained rice, fragrant with cardamoms and cinnamon, sprinkled with fried cashew nuts from the south, and buttoned with sultanas from Persia. Quail stuffed with thinly sliced boiled eggs, swimming in rich gravy, roast legs of venison, capon filled with spiced minced lamb, and bowls of freshly cooked vegetables. It goes on.
Okay.
Now, give me something.
Right.
Is this once again your need for description to the extent that you want your reader to almost savor that meal themselves? Or is it your own very great partiality towards the culinary skills?
No, I love food, but my dear friend Veer Saki would be able to kind of explain it better, I suppose, if he was here. But one thing, no, but seriously speaking, part of it is logic, part of it is research. I looked at the kind of rice, I looked at the diet habits of the Magadha period. I looked at the rice which is cultivated there, what people ate most. Okay. And I looked at the, there is logic. I mean, and also there was a lot of trade with Persia. So if you kind of, it was logic basically. I mean, like the Persians were the ones who brought pulao to India. So it is not the Mughals. So the Persians had a relationship with the Magadha Empire since then. So it's only logical that there would be a Persian version of pulao served with Indian rice at the emperor's table. Was very close to the Persian. I mean, the Persian Empire was very strong because if you remember, Ashoka's, Chandragupta's wife is a Persian princess who was daughter of Seleucus, whom Chandragupta defeats. After Seleucus, after Alexander leaves, Seleucus remains and gets control of the Achaemenid Empire. So it's logic. I mean, it's absolute logic.
So your description of food is a combination of three things. One, your own love of food.
Yes.
Two, the logic.
Yes.
And three, again, wanting your reader to feel part of that meal and
salivate.
Yes. To put it in a different way.
But tell you something, food is also history. One thing which runs through this entire book is a sense of history. Even mythology is a sense of history. I mean, if I can see what is the origin of the Brahmin? I mean, it's not in the Navin, it's not, I mean, it's just briefly kind of. See, the Brahmin is from the family of Ravan. Now, Ravan is not a purely mythological figure. Ravan has to be a historical figure. And there is enough evidence, archaeological evidence. So, I mean, there is archaeological evidence of Ram going to Lanka and whatever, as many of our current historians claim as the absolute truth. I'm sure then by logic, Ravan is a historical figure, right? And Ravan was the only Brahmin in the age of the Kshatriya wielding the sword. Apart from Parashurama, who I owe my origin to as possible Kerala. I mean, the Ravan was the only great Brahmin warrior. I mean, the Brahmin scholar, he was a Brahmin warrior. He was a man of great intellect. I mean, he was a scholar. I mean, he was a great king. So to kind of take that historical aspect of Ravan and give him the place it deserves in the pantheon of Indian royalty, subcontinental royalty, and also to kind of as to give a spy and a king and a ruler, they have to deserve each other to win. Like Chandragupta is not exactly a spy, but like Machiavelli and Cesare Borgia, or Chandragupta and this guy, Walsingham and Queen Elizabeth. I mean, it is that intense relationship and trust which has saved the empire and made it grow. So I said, why not Ravan get a spy he deserves, and why not a spy get? And then I said, okay, I mean, do I name this guy? I said, no, I don't want to name this guy. I mean, because it goes to mystic, it goes.
In fact, I was coming to that. Because what did strike me was that in this day and age, especially, you've made it very clear, and from what you're saying also, perhaps it's historical, that it is the Brahmin who was gifted with all the abilities to be able to make out what the conspiracies are, to safeguard the king, to teach courtcraft, statesmanship. All this was of that period.
Right.
And it seems to me that you're very, very clear that the person who has to be the one who actually decides everything is the Brahmin.
True.
So, from what you say also, you see that as absolutely so.
Yeah.
And would I be right in assuming two things? And I'm going to ask you two questions in one.
Okay.
One, would I be right in assuming that you have called the book the Brahmin because he personifies what the Brahmin of the day? I go back to Ravana, as you said. You said Ravan was one of the greatest kings, the greatest.
Yeah.
That in a way he personifies the ability of the Brahmins of those days. They called him Brahmin because he really was a personification of what a Brahmin should be.
Absolutely.
Question number one. And why? Question number two is that unlike what we are taught historically, the Brahmin was never a warrior other than Parashurama, other than Ravana. But you've made this Brahmin an absolute warrior, and as I read that part, like probably the most skillful one who could have beaten Bruce Lee in a fight. Now, is that any reason why you've given him that quality? Is it how you perceive Brahmins historically?
No, I didn't perceive the Brahmins as a caste historically. In fact, it was very amusing because when the Brahmin was released, the first Brahmin one was released, I got such incredible hate mail which called me a Tamil Palakkad Brahmin, which I'm not a Brahmin, who was actually encouraging patriarchy, the pushing, Brahmins and stuff. That's I was amused, of course, but the fact of the matter is that the Brahmin as such, I don't see it as it's a caste. For me, it's a title. Because the Brahmin is the first Brahmin. See, this Brahmin is one in a line of Brahmins. So it is only natural corollary that a Brahmin king would have a Brahmin ancestor, a spymaster. And the Brahmin in the book is taught by that very famous sage, and his wife was Ashoka. I forget the name now, was Ravan's parents. So they taught him in the forest all the skills, the children. So they didn't see them as a Brahmin so for me, the Brahmin is a title. It is not a caste.
What I did find, and I must say this, is that without a doubt, you have made the Brahmin personify what you see as the optimum person to be able to live in those days. You've really made him the complete man, let me say. He is the complete man. Now, is it, or would I be right in assuming that you have tried to continue the image of the Brahmin, and your return of the Brahmin is going to really lead to a third Brahmin, or the Brahmin once again? And are you going to, because as you say, the Brahmin goes back so many generations before he came to this Brahmin. Perhaps he has many more generations following. So do you have any such ideas in mind?
Yeah, I do. I want to add to your question a little bit more. The answer a little bit more. For me, the Brahmin symbolizes the perfect man. The Brahmin symbolizes the virtue of what a man should be. A man, I don't mean patriarchal made, but a man should be. Now, subconsciously, I suppose that the Brahmin holds elevated position in Indian caste structure. So at that point, you can accuse me of being a casteist or influenced by caste, though I'm not a Brahmin. But for me, it's a metaphor. So to that, a Brahmin is supposed to be a statesman, a Brahmin is supposed to be cunning, learned, a scholar, a debater, a strategist.
And a warrior. You made him a big warrior.
So what I did was I added the warrior part to him. So he became the perfect man. For me, the Brahmin is a symbol. He's a metaphor for the, I would say niche that are, not the kind of niche Superman, but a moral Superman who upholds morality with cruelty.
Okay, can I ask you one thing there? I don't want to cut in on you. but it makes it very interesting. If you see the Brahmin like that, would I assume that your superheroes were actually Ravana and Parshurama?
Oh, absolutely. Ravan is a superhero as well as I'm concerned. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot deny that Ravan was a great soldier, a great warrior, a great king, and a Brahmin, and a Hindu. In fact, I think Ravan would be of great significance for his qualities.
In which case, why did you not make your whole story around Lanka and Ravana's time rather than Magadha and Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka's time?
No, then it becomes mythology. Then it involves kind of, weapons which are kind of, no, there is part of Ravan, in the first book.
Yes.
But then I don't want, like this arrows kind of falling and, I don't want, I mean, and a lot of people are doing it. Like my friend Anand, brilliant, absolutely brilliant on Sita, on Ravan. So no, I don't want to do that. I want a historical thriller. So it was just a coincidence. I would say it was a subconscious continuity of my own interests, my own attitudes. And that's what happens in a book, a writer's attitude, a writer's kind of sensibilities, a writer's sense of history, memories. Everything contributes to what he comes out. That's an artist's fate.
So do I take it that the genre which you have liked is historical thrillers?
Yes.
Because you've written many books on many different themes, including the last one also of Delhi and people in Delhi. So I think when you look at one and look at the other, it's almost like it's not the same person writing both books.
Yeah.
So when you write each of your books, is there a change in your mind? Is there a mind shift? Is there a change in the way you think, in your attitudes, whatever it is? Because when I read these two books, I couldn't believe it's the same author who wrote the two books.
True. I mean, there is obviously a change in mindset, but the thing is that I'm interested in a lot of things. I'm curious about a lot of things. I read a lot. And I meet people, I like people a lot, I like situations. So for me, obviously, I mean, if I have a point of view, essentially what's it? I'm telling a story, right? So I tell a story. A fantasy is what? A fantasy like this or a historical thing would come from a sediment or a base which has been created by your reading, stories you've heard from your parents, your grandchildren, or your Amar Chakrakatha, or what you've studied for exams in school, or an old tomb, Ashoka pillars, or whatever. It's all a combination of it, right? Telling a story. So Delhi is a contemporary story, but when this is another kind of an epic. So yes, I mean, I'm just telling a story.
And I am presuming that what gives you the greatest joy is telling a historical fantasy, as you put it, story. Yeah. Actually, there, Ravi, I wanted to ask you, how easy do you think? I'm a person who read the Brahmin and then I read Return of the Brahmin. So for me, the continuation was very easy. Now, I noticed that you, in one paragraph, really have so beautifully tried to, make the synthesis between the two. If I can just read that one paragraph, I thought it was very well written because you really tried to say what the Brahmin was all about. The word, what you have said is, he had served Ashoka before the Kalinga War, and it also saved him from the wiles of the Kalingan ambassador Lord Suma, the beautiful assassin Bloodflower, and the power-hungry Prime Minister Radhagupta. He had also stopped the golden sight. This is your mythology of Ravana's. Yes, a weapon powerful enough to destroy the world, created by a great king millennia ago, which is Ravana.
Yeah.
From falling into the hands of Ashoka's enemies, he had given it to the master of the Tamralippi monastery, Rahula of Kapilavastu, so that it would never be used. The monastery was revered in all of Magadha. When the Brahmin had exposed Lord Suma's conspiracy, the diplomat had been mutilated on Ashoka's orders. His limbs were chopped off, but his tongue was left intact so he could warn his countrymen that war was coming. Saddened by Ashoka's determination to attack Kalinga, the spymaster had left the royal service and had never been seen again until now. You see, there are two things which come out of this. Yeah. One, according to me, you have really tried to bring out the gist of the Brahmin.
Yeah.
And in fact, it is a continuation. You can't have, Bahubali, this conclusion without Bahubali, the beginning.
Right.
So in many ways, your Return of the Brahmin is a continuation.
Correct.
But all you did was in this one paragraph summarize what had happened earlier.
True.
Now that is absolutely fascinating. Did it strike you? Or did you ever think that this alone would be enough? Or did you feel that this would perhaps make a reader want to get the Brahmin and read the Brahmin also?
Yeah, I had two choices. One was that just write this so that it gives you a primer to what the previous book was. The second was, as you said, try to hook the guy into going back to the original Brahmin concept. And also, as as an editorial decision, also we decided to kind of tighten the fit so that you don't go away from it. And my answer to this question would be going back to the previous question, whether there's another Brahmin coming. Yes, I'm actually working on a
Brahmin 3.
Brahmin trilogy. It's going to be Brahmin the beginning.
Oh, I see.
That is going to explain a lot of things.
Oh, that's going to be very interesting. So you go back in point of time to explain what all happened to lead to the Brahmin and his Return of the Brahmin. And that brings me to what I feel would be the last thing which I've been wondering about and which I have been personally very inquisitive about. You pointed out here, and it also came at the Brahmin, that he leaves Ashoka because of the Kalinga War.
Right.
Not after the Kalinga War.
Right.
But before the Kalinga War.
Yeah.
Now, why do you see that he has left Ashoka before that war? Is it because you felt that war was a bad war?
Yeah.
Or is it down to the cruelty of the war? Or do you think it was a bad political decision?
No, I think, the Brahmin is he was a great friend of Ashoka. As they had fought together when they were, young men. He was Ashoka's, spymaster in right hand, and Ashoka was called the Black Prince. So he knows Ashoka. He knows, the compassion Ashoka is capable of. At the same time, the cruelty Ashoka is capable of. In fact, once he says, when Brahmin saves Ashoka's life, first book, he says, Ashoka tells the Brahmin, as a man, as a friend, I'm grateful to you for saving my life. But as a king, I cannot be, because I am the king. So the Brahmin understands Ashoka very well. And he sees that this is the way to perdition. This is the way to making his soul more savage. This is the way to kind of, fuel his ambition. And Ashoka was not a just king. Ashoka was a good king.
He was not just?
He was not a just king. He was a good king. He was a good administrator. He did bring a religion. See, for me, Ashoka's Buddhism was quality. He actually, do you think that the great Chola Empire or somebody is going to say, just run over and on the back and say, hey, I'll be good because Ashoka says so? No chance, man.
Since you said so much about Ashoka, it brings me to Ashoka's wife, whom you have actually made a heroine in many ways, a very strong person, a person who's equally cunning, and who's capable of an equal cruelty.
Absolutely.
As Ashoka, which comes out both in the first book and more so in the second book.
Right.
Is this something which you have picked up from your historical study, or is this your?
That was Ashoka's favorite king. This is very little research about Ashoka, but whatever little exists, and some of it is kind of I think a lot of it has been put together from strands. But anyway, Asandimitra was, I think, his third wife, and she had tremendous influence and she was the one whom he really loved the most. So she played a huge role, and she comes at a particular time when Ashoka is becoming power. So again, I use logic. And it's always tempting to kind of have a beautiful queen. And a beautiful queen who is,
she's a warrior herself.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if a beautiful queen who is just a nice girl would not last with somebody like that just because she was beautiful, because the king has a choice of beautiful. And you had to match fits with the king. King has to acknowledge you. He will never acknowledge you as an equal because that's the king's. That is the king's prerogative. That's kind of built into the king.
In fact, I thought that in many ways you try to model her on Noor Jahan. But once again, because of the militant streak by which you admire Parshurama and Ravana, you had made her also a very strong fighter, a woman like that.
No, those were the days when women were very powerful. Those were the days when women had strength. The women were like, I mean, we have a tradition of great women queens. I'm sorry, queens and great women warriors. I mean, Indian women are not kind of the weaklings which the British Victorian mores and the current kind of, Indian social system, makes them on.
Well, Ravi, let me say one thing. I think you have really chosen the topic on which we can conclude now.
Okay.
Because time is running out.
Okay.
And I'm very happy. Why I said you chose the topic was your admiration for the feminine race,
Okay.
for women. I think that's a wonderful thing. Apart from the fact that there's so many nuances of your book I could have asked you for. We could have spent another couple of hours on it. But we'll do that next time we have a drink together.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Ravi. That was very interesting.
The pleasure. And by the way, you're a Brahmin, so let's kind of conclude on that. Always good to talk to a sharp Brahmin who's a fighter in court. Anyway, warrior in your own right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ravi and Mr. Sundaram, for that fascinating conversation. All of you watching, please do pick up your copy of the book. We hope you will all stay logged on to watch our next session, Cricket, Facts and Fiction. Sunil Gupta and Suprita Das in conversation with Keshav Guha. This will be broadcast here at 8:30 p.m. IST. Good night and take care.
In these times during COVID, when we're all sitting at home, it's sort of like a ray of light that we get to watch these amazing sessions when we can't all be together. It certainly brightens up my evenings.
आज पेंडेमिक में हम डिजिटली जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल कर रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि हमारे सामने श्रोता नहीं है, हम आपस में बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस फील को, उस उमंग को महसूस कर सकते हैं कि हजारों लाखों लोग हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, हमको सुन रहे हैं और कहीं ना कहीं कोई एक सार्थक हस्तक्षेप हो रहा है.
People who came online to view and listen to our incredible speakers from across the world, we were able to continue in our tradition of ensuring the free flow of knowledge and information.